Going
It's
good.
good.
Yeah, going well?
Yeah.
Good.
Manny, I just want to let you know that I'm going to be here for 20 minutes. I have to leave, okay?
Well, you know what? First of all, no worries. There's never an insult. First of all, you can always jump in and out of a Zoom call. No one knows. Technology got broken up. No worries. Second of all, we're not insulted at all. Yeah. So you know what? And feel free to extend the invitation to anyone. This is like an opportunity for us to share ideas, learn together. You know, there's something really invaluable about spending this time together. Like we're making the most of it. Hi, Ariel. How are you?
Good.
Okay, so last week we did kind of an intro to Pirkei Avot, to ethics of our fathers. We talked about putting it in context, historical context, where Mishnah falls out within the scope of the whole Torah, written Torah, oral Torah. So if you missed that, feel free. If you missed that, feel free to go back to last week's intro. Like I said, discussed when, like, again, Mishnah, where does it fall out? Written Torah, oral Torah, who said it? Why did they say it? And where the Tanaim. So we did that last week. We also discussed the whole concept of Mishnah in general, Jewish law in general, and how Pirkei Avot really ethics, a book of ethics, really applies to each and every one of us in our reality and our, like, the how to do it. And I mentioned that story of, you know, that student was like, I need to do an ethics report. And then I'm like, oh, let's do it on Jewish ethics. She's like, wait, there are Jewish ethics? I'm like, yes, there are. It's called Pirkei Avot. So we've been studying this together. And actually my mother had mentioned that she may get on, but I guess she didn't make it. Hopefully she will. So all women come together. Let's learn. It's a great opportunity to connect and reorient ourselves. We talked a little bit about how Pirkei Avot is studied traditionally between Pesach and Shavuot, because there's 6 sections. So we do one each Shabbat during the Mincha time. The ethics and the morals and the values in it are really timeless, as relevant now as when they were, you know, composed, put together, compiled by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and all the different authors. We did talk about this incredible book about Pirkei Avot. I sent the link out last week, and how it's a really good book to bring into our homes. And I feel like right now, kind of the call of the hour, or the like mandate of where we're at right now, is like really bringing Judaism into our homes, right? We're not running out to services or to synagogues or to big programs. It's all about, it's a kind of refocusing and pivoting back to the house, to the family, to the core. So this book is a great book for home, for family, for children of any age, for the child within, which we'll talk about shortly, obviously. And so what I was hoping to do is, at least this week, we'll start with Perek Aleph. Now, I did mention that Chabad has a custom that we study Pirkei Avot from not just Pesach to Shavuot, but until Rosh Hashanah. And so for those of you who were here last week, this intro may be a little repetitive, but it gives context for someone who's just jumping in at this point. So we have Chabad as a tradition that over the summer we can get a little more chilled, a little bit more lax, a little bit more like out of routine, even though that's like, I don't know, the past 9 weeks feel like summertime, right? Like kids home, like, you know, I don't know, here in Texas, it's gotten pretty warm. So it feels a little summery, so it makes sense. But Chabad has this tradition to study it throughout the summer, not just ending at Shavuot, but continuing on. And we said that the reason these things are studied now is that in the Jewish calendar, Judaism looks at the Jewish calendar, that those markers on the calendar are times that we're meant to tap into the message of what happened to us as a people, to the holidays, and draw that energy or that message, that reality into our lives. So what's the energy and reality? We said is the Jews were in a slave mentality, slave reality, and then shifted to be Torah ready, and they had to really transform and work on themselves. And we said one layer of that was Sefirat Omer, which we talked about a few classes ago in Torah and Tea, counting of the Omer, the daily counting, the daily kind of introspection, self-refinement, really drawing that into our lives, working on different character traits, different aspects of self. And here comes another layer. Another layer, Pirkei Avot, certainly a book of ethics, a book of morals, a book of how to do what we are meant to do, right? The how, right? Not like, okay, give tzedakah or you know, don't say Lashon Hara, or it's like how, right? How do we greet someone walking down the street? And so a lot of those stuff that are, a lot of these values that we study in Pirkei Avot, and then we said in the last class, kind of more in the intro, there's a lot of them that are going to pop up and be like, oh, I've heard that before. I didn't realize that was Jewish. And it's really, Pirkei Avot is like one of these, it's timeless and incredible. And I love learning it. I love studying it. And so hopefully we could bring this into our own homes. And you know what I find? That whenever we're studying something together, the beauty of learning Torah together is anytime you're studying Torah, you're studying something together, what happens is invariably the ideas and the messages kind of trickle into the week or into the day or into the reality where you're at. And I see Pam, you're nodding and smiling, but I find it for myself as well. Like whenever I'm like having this conversation, like later on, I'm like, oh, I so needed to hear this at this moment, or I so needed to discuss it at this moment. So that's what we said. We said there's 24 books of Tanakh, there's 63 tractates in Mishnah, and we are going to dive deep. Last week, we talked briefly, if you recall, does anyone remember last week what we talked about, the two Mishnahs that we kind of tapped on? Anyone remember? Okay. Feel free to jump in if you want to. At any point, unmute yourself. The only reason why I have people muted is just because background noise, it makes it easier. But like, this is not I'm not a professor with a presentation. This is interactive, jump in. Hopefully you have your nice cup of tea or coffee or wine. It's not too early for wine. There are day wines too. Whatever your beverage of choice is, right? No judgment, zero judgment. And we'll just jump in. Last week, okay, we'll jump right in. Last week, we opened up, first of all, actually what we covered, again, just briefly, we covered the timeline, the events, the sages, their historical context. Great map in here. I sent out the photos and the link for buying it. If anyone wants, let me know. I'll post it actually maybe below also. The next one we're going to start with, even though we're not up to chapter 1 on the calendar, meaning Shabbat, we're not up to that yet. We are going to study it. We'll just start with 1 because I feel like we could definitely study this throughout the summer. Like there's, again, like I said, it's this timeless, and so we can. And also I think next week, Torah and Tea, we're going to cover Shavuot because there's such a, I think like, okay, we'll talk about Shavuot soon, but like I feel like Shavuot does not get the PR it deserves. Like people know Purim and Passover and Hanukkah and Shavuot, like, wait, what is that? Milchik, cheesecake, dairy? But like what really is Shavuot? And also there's a really incredible feminine presence in the Shavuot holiday that I think often gets kind of like not paid attention to. So we will do that next week. But for this week, we'll jump into the first parak. So there's something so beautiful. Last week, we talked about the opening Mishnah, and the opening Mishnah, Mishnah Aleph, which we talked about last week, was about how Moshe Kibal Torah Sinai. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai, Masarua, Umasara leYeshua, veYeshua leZakanim, Zakanim leNeviim, and Neviim Masara leAnshe Knesset Gadola. Okay, so we talked about the idea of like, it seems, when you look at it, we talked about how on a very superficial level, it almost looks like we're just mentioning like the context of like how the Torah was transmitted. I mean, like we're just saying like, oh, FYI, this is setting the stage for where we're at, right? Like on a very surface level, we say, okay, so we're studying a book of ethics. Before we study it, let's understand where these ethics fall in place in context to the rest of the Torah. Meaning, like, just like we wanted to understand the historical context of where time period-wise as Jews, where this fell out, we could think that, okay, this Mishnah seems very surface level. Moshe received the Torah from God at Sinai, gave it over to Yeshua to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets gave it over to the men of great assembly. So we could again think, all right, just setting the stage. So there's actually a beautiful, beautiful discussion by Lubavitch Rebbe on this Mishnah itself. And basically explaining that it's not just giving us the historical framework of the 23 generations from Moshe till the book of the Mishnah, okay? It's actually teaching us something about those 5 types of people, or those 5 people, and I'm saying types because let's say the men of the Great Assembly were a large group, right? It wasn't, or the elders wasn't just one person. It's kind of, there's a framework of saying, okay, when we're going to study Torah, when you're going to try to learn and you're going to try to make Torah yours, or you're going to try to dive into something that's talking about ethics or values and make it yours, there's a mindset, a framework to see this through. And I realized after last week, we didn't cover that. So I'm going to add it in over here and feel free like to jump in at any point. But what is it about these 5, either people or groups of people, that we can kind of take away that give us a lens and a framework to understand things? Because it's not just giving us historical context, because otherwise it would say in this generation, it's not just painting the stage, because otherwise it would just say, okay, this generation, and this is why it was written at this point. Like, it would just kind of give it that way, or there'd be an intro. But here it's like the first Mishnah that we're learning in ethics is about this transmission. And what is it actually talking about? So looking at each person or groups of people, there's a real practical takeaway that we can really pull into our lives. And let's say I'm not someone, let's say now, it's not like, okay, well, I'm going to read this, and now because I understand this, okay, now when I'm studying Mishnah or when I'm studying Torah, then it's relevant to me. These mindsets or frameworks are actually the framework or mindset for becoming and being a learner. So they're really applicable across the board. So let's look at first Moshe. We all know a little bit about Moshe's life. What do we know about Moshe's life? Anyone know anything? If you had to describe Moshe, feel free to unmute yourself. If you had to describe Moshe's character trait or who Moshe was, we all know the time period Moshe lived in, right? We all know that Moshe was a leader of the Jewish people. Anyone want to jump in and share what they know about Moshe, don't know about Moshe?
The outstanding characteristic of Moshe to me was his humility.
Yes.
Throughout the whole time, at no point does he say, I am the leader, listen to me because I'm the leader.
It's actually amazing that you said that, because literally, if you had to describe Moshe, it's Anav Mikala Adam, the most humble of all men. Wow. The most humble of all men. Meaning, and Moshe was like, if someone else was chosen for this job, they would have done a better job. Humility. Why is humility so important? It's also amazing because even when Hashem came to Moshe and said, look, I need you to be my representative. I need you to free the Jewish people. Moshe was not looking for the job, right? He was not not only that, he was like, I can't, I can't speak, my brother, a lot of different reasons why he shouldn't do this or take up this role. Okay, first of all, we knew it wasn't the simplest role because the Jewish people were a little complicated. We're still complicated, but that's part of who we are, that's okay. But the humility that Moshe possessed and is really important in learning. Anyone want to jump in why you think humility is a huge factor in being a learner?
He's teachable. That allows him to be teachable, open, without his pride getting in the way and saying, I know there's probably a better way. What is it?
Okay. So you're saying that in order to learn, you got to be open. That if we think we know everything, then what happens? You can't learn.
You can't learn. There's barriers. So humility in the sense of not losing your dignity. He's got his dignity, but knowing that I haven't arrived yet. I know that there's things that I need to learn. And so his person allowed him, naturally to get in like that and not having to learn the hard lessons over and over again.
We're always learning lessons over and over again. Hashem, whenever we think we got it, Hashem's like, but wait, there's more. Well, you thought you knew how to let go? Well, actually, I'm going to give you triplets, and then let's see if you know how to let go. Well, actually, let's throw a coronavirus in there. Let's see how we really know how to let go, right? So yes. But humility we don't always need the constant reminders, but humility is the first step. Because if we know it all, there's nothing. That's why one of the joys of having so many teenagers around is I'm surrounded by people who know it all. No. The beauties. No, the idea of being open to learn. And later on, we'll see a Mishnah. We'll discuss who do we learn from? And it says, actually, I learn most from my students. And the truth is, when people are different approaches to parenting, I'm like, I learned everything on the job. My kids were literally the best teacher, but we have to be open to learn from it, right? Open to learn from these experiences, open to learn from those moments. It takes an openness. You know the line, the more I learn, the more I realize that I know nothing at all, right? All of us, you have a lot of opinions. Come on, how many of us had a lot of opinions on parenting before we were parents? Yeah, a lot. And a lot of oh, my kids will never, fill in the blanks, whatever that is, right? My car will never look like, I'll never be that kind of grandmother, whatever. We all have to, humility is huge. anyone can think in their own lives how humility is a real tool in learning for yourself? Any experiences that like you feel you want to share that like really push you to learn? I could also say humbling moments in our lives and experiences also teach us a lot.
Yeah.
Like moments that are not comfortable. I was just having a conversation with a group of high schoolers and they were saying like, this is such an uncomfortable time period. And I said, you know, girls, we're so uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, but that's actually when we learn.
Yeah.
So humility is not always the most comfortable emotion, but it's certainly an emotion that when we bring more humility into our lives, whether it comes to our children or our spouses, being open to hear, that's growth. And so really lens number one, tool number one, be open, be humble, or be humble so you're open. Humility is a big one. And moving on to Joshua. So anyone know anything about Joshua? Like, what do you know about Joshua's in general? So Joshua, go ahead, Pam.
He was Moses's finest student, maybe even his only real student. And he would stay at the tent where God met up with Moses, and he would guard over the tent.
Amazing. I think you again touched upon the essence of Joshua. We all know that Joshua is the one who took the Jewish people from the desert and actually into the land of Israel. Like he was the next leader right after Moshe. And we know that Moshe, as I think the way you articulated, Pam, he was really the most loyal, devoted student. Meaning, he was Joshua ben Nun, Joshua, the son of Nun, and he was right there, present, consistent, diligent, faithful, right?
Yeah.
Reliable.
Didn't he
right?
also marry the woman that threw out the red sash to protect? Am I right about this story? Yeah, Rahab. Mm-hmm.
You know what? I have to say I'm not sure. Not because, I'm just not sure because anyone who knows me, who's taken any classes with me, when it comes to names and dates, you know this already, but those who study with me for a while, it's like all, like it's not my strength. But I would love to, I'm sure it's in a quick Google. Who is
I'm
Joshua?
sure too. I'll have to look.
You let us know. Let us know, okay? So we know that faithfulness and devotion and commitment and stick with it. And I have to say that I think that, I think Sarah, you touched upon this in the past, like part of the beginning of this, as much as we all to transition to this new lifestyle that we're kind of going through right now, knowing that there's a beginning and an end is comfortable. Because how committed or how disciplined can we be to this new reality? And that's part of why it's so hard for so many, whether you're older or you're you're immune compromised, or whether meaning sticking with a certain mindset or framework. Like you could be calm for a while or generous for a while. Oh, what's the answers, Sharon? Hold on, Sharon, go ahead.
Turn on your mic.
Yeah, it's from Chabad.org. Rahab was a resident of Jericho who sheltered 2 spies from Joshua, whom Joshua had sent to scout out the city, blah, 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 and eventually married, yes, so it's right there.
Thank you, Pam. Good old Google. Google's great. You learn so much. As long as you don't believe everything Google says, you're fine. Right?
So when was Joshua born?
Sharon, you want to pull up Joshua's bio?
I'm on Chabad.org. Well, I'm still on Rahab. I'm sorry. I don't know exactly when he was.
All right. I feel like we need a profile of him. I'm sure there is, by the way.
Yeah, just in terms of supposedly nobody who came out of Egypt lived to enter Eretz Yisrael. So.
No, not nobody.
Oh.
Not nobody.
Oh.
Who was the spies? There were 2 spies.
Caleb and Joshua.
That what? What was the difference between them? That I do know.
I don't know that.
Yeah. So they were sent. How many spies were sent?
12, I think.
Right. There were 12 spies sent to scout out the land, and like, which Moshe did not think was the best, like not best plan, but they did. And anyone know anything about what happened?
They got scared by what they saw.
10 came back with negative reports, toxic. And who did not?
Caleb and Joshua.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
It says here Pinchas.
Pinchas? Hold on.
Pinchas.
Hold on. Let's say why. You know what I feel like we need to do? We need to do research, and we need for next week to have all this information.
Yeah, Joshua sent the spies.
All right. You know what? For next week, we're going to have to do research on Joshua. There we go. We got ourselves homework to do. All of us. Sharon looks like she's already writing the report. Sharon, next week we're gonna start off Torah and Tea with you teaching us this. Sound like a plan?
Yes, I'm on it.
All right.
Let me write my assignment notes. Oh, by the way, Manya, I did buy the book, but it hasn't gotten here yet.
Yeah, no, I knew it wasn't gonna. Bye, Susanna. Mwah. I know that the book hadn't arrived. That's why I was figured we'll do like 2. Hi, Judith. I didn't even see you over there. How are you? We'll do like 2 or 3 Mishnahs, and then we'll start using the book as soon as everyone has it. So next week we'll do Shavuot, and then the week after Shavuot we'll be able to pick up with Mishnah again.
Okay, I just wanted to know it's on its way. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know. And you know what? The truth is, you could still learn without the book. It's just I think as you're a mom of young kids, I think you're gonna actually enjoy having that as a part of your library as well.
What would you mind telling? I wasn't able to join you last week. What book are you talking about?
I'll send the link is in the chat. Hi, Tamara. This one. It's
Tamara,
a book on Pirkei Avot on ethics of our fathers.
I'll send it to you to your text, Tamara.
Thank you. It's hard for me to find things in my email.
No, we're gonna send. It's on WhatsApp. It's in the WhatsApp group. Okay.
But thank you, Sharon, too.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's move on and understand that we're going to do the research on Joshua, because clearly there's a group of 6 or 8 of us and there's a lot of mixed facts, myself included. So we need to get this straight. Sharon's going to do a research report. She doesn't know she just got homework. In case you were bored, Sharon. And she's going to share with us a little bit more so we have our facts straight. We'll walk away from this. Perfect. You put on your agenda. I'm impressed. My agendas are I almost threw my notebooks out during COVID. I'm like, have jobs, to-do lists, and then whatever, roll with it. Be more for me, it's about also flexibility for right now where I need to be. Okay. So going back to what we're saying, that Yehoshua represented real dedication, real stick with it, determination, meaning for so many, I don't know about for you, but when you want to learn, for myself, I could tell you that character traits that I need to work on are things that I want to grow in. One of the things that are more challenging is sticking with it, right? Is diligence and perseverance, is making sure that I'm not getting distracted by the chaos of life and not following through. And so the beautiful idea from Yehoshua we could learn is that a key ingredient or key factor in being a learner, someone who learns, someone who can grow, is what? That diligence, that commitment, that focus. And we know it's actually a mitzvah to study Torah every day. Why every day? Why wouldn't Torah say this is a great thing? Do it once a week, once a day, once a year, seasonally, because we need that. If we see Torah as our guide, right? If we see Torah as God's will and God's wisdom, if we see Torah not as a history book, but as a Mora Derech, a guide for our lives, okay? Then of course we need to do that regularly. We constantly need to check in, which is, we know as a Jew, living like a Jew or living a Jewish life, it's not about Yom Kippur or once a week. It's daily, the daily grind. There's a large to-do list, right? So that determination, that sticking with things, that openness to learn, you need to have it. And I see, even sometimes I'll say I have a child who's trying to learn a certain skill. You ever watched a child try to learn how to walk or they try and they fail and they try and they fail, like again and again and again and again, until thank God they get it, right? So for us, one of the lessons we could learn is, let's say there's an idea, and I would love to hear any lessons that you guys could take away, how this skill or this mindset of determination and of drive helps you. Could you hold on a second? Yes. How that skill or that drive helps you be a learner. Does anyone want to jump in and share how they think that could help you be a learner? Learning from Yoshua, that dedication, that perseverance, that commitment. You're muted, Sharon, go ahead, jump in.
Sorry. It just seems so obvious. I mean, it sets you up for success in your life. And that doesn't mean economic or anything, but the idea that you're a disciplined human being in one area is going to be disciplined in other areas. And that discipline in our mindset, how we go forth in the world, how we solve our problems, a lot of that, it's nice to know that you don't have to have that burden. I mean, a lot of this is already written out for us. We just have to apply it. And like you said, learn it.
Yeah. I think the beautiful thing about studying Torah is, again, that timelessness, because God is, if it's God's will and God's wisdom, right? We believe Torah is God's will and God's wisdom. God is eternal. Torah is eternal. So the lesson that we could learn from Torah, like you said, it's like, we don't have to like struggle and try to figure this out. There are these tools that are embedded in Torah study or in learning and making Torah yours that give us these skills that can carry us through life. So at the end of the day, yes, there's a reason it's a mitzvah to study Torah day and night. There's a reason it's a mitzvah to study, like regular habitual Torah study, because it's through that. And you know what? It even discusses later on in the Mishnah, like how do we get something to like kind of stick, is by doing it again and again. And again, from a neurological perspective, you know, we talked about this in the past, how neurologically to train ourselves in a certain behavior, you just got to wire those patterns into your brain. And behaviorally also, we know like how something becomes a habit. So if we make Torah study a habit, it becomes a part of us. And when it becomes a part of us, then it becomes something incredible in our toolbox to function in life, where Torah does provide those incredible tools so that we can, you know, I hate the cliche of live our best life. And I don't love the idea of live our best life, because I feel like that's like, oh, my best life is sitting in Cancun with a margarita. But live our life to the best that we can, so that we're here for why we exist. Get what I'm saying? Like why we're here. So yes, it takes that drive and determination, that grit, that not giving up. And Yehoshua certainly, and that's, Hashem chose him to be the person to take that leadership, take the Jewish people from the desert, right? Moshe couldn't take them into the land of Israel, settle the land, divide the land, deal with the battles. Oh, I love what you just wrote. Could you, as Sarah wrote, to live our most meaningful life. Yeah. I will challenge you a little bit that sometimes living a meaningful life could mean different things to different people. So we have to also make sure it's a purposeful life, because I think sometimes these cliches of like my meaningful life is like what works for me. So it could be a little bit of like, not a trap, but it could be a little bit of a trap. Like, what's meaningful to me? You know what I mean? Like, it's subjective. Meaning is very subjective. So, but yes, definitely a life of purpose, a life of meaning. And, thank God we're in the presence of people who living a meaningful life means something holy and uplifting and bringing light into the world. But I would say Hashem put us all here for a reason. So living that purpose is tremendous.
You spent too much time with adolescents and young adults.
That is definitely true. But I can tell you, there are definitely some adults we could look at who like their version of meaning isn't meaningful to me. Someone may look at my life and be like, well, that's not meaningful, But so, our purpose of why we're here, why Hashem created us, and that's tremendous. Okay, moving on. So at least we accomplished getting through these 5 characters and these 5 takeaways. The next group of people, Moshe, Kibbutz, Torah, Yoshua, now comes the Zakanim, the elders. And again, remember we said this is 23, it kind of spans the 23 generations from Sinai, which we said at Sinai, Moshe got the oral Torah, the written Torah in one. We talked about it in the past class, so if anyone wants to zoom back to it, feel free to watch it, last week's intro. But now this is 23 generations, but there's not just 23 generations. It's not random. It's what are the takeaways from Zakanim? So Zakanim translates as elders. The Talmud also actually says why Zakanim. Sharon, did you want to say something? Hold on. Go ahead.
No, in the Techalim it says, I'm sorry, I don't read the Hebrew very well, but his desire is in the law of the Lord, and his law he meditates day and night. Again, I mean, and that's in our Techalim, so it goes back to what you were just talking about.
We're saying of a kitzuba yom v'layla, like learning day and night, yes. And even more so, by the way, we talked about this last week, if you recall, but we talked about the Shema. When we're talking about written Torah, what do we say in Shema? Like that oneness of Hashem is when?
Yes.
In your house, on the street, in the morning, in the afternoon. Like, there's not like Jew and Torah.
No.
Right? Like we talked about in the past when we talked about Rabbi Akiva saying it's our water. It's what keeps us, like, it's like we're fish. The water is Torah. We need Torah. So we talked about that, I think, in the Omer class, right?
Yes.
Remember how we talked about that? Like, it's our life. Or I think in the Sinai Scholars Mom's class, I'm not sure which one, but we've definitely mentioned it before, the idea, because it's a recurring theme.
Yeah.
And by the way, Hashem, Jews, and the Torah, it's all one. It's not like there's God and there's us and then there's Torah. And in a way, actually, the truth is the beauty of living a life where you're gaining wisdom from Torah is it's very, you can lead, like using Sarah's adjective, a very meaningful way. And it's very centering and healthy. Okay, we have to obviously plug in, right? So yes, thank you for sharing that, Sharon. Okay, so moving on, what is it about Zakanim? Anyone know anything about the elders? Yeah, no problem, we'll see you soon. Okay, so elders were obviously the elders, wise sages. What is it that the Torah teaches us is about being an elder? What, like the line, youth is wasted on the young. You ever heard that line? It's like youth is wasted on the young, right? In the sense that there's a certain, we learn from our experiences. And I can't consider myself an elder. I think I'm just starting to consider myself an adult, like the big birthday I had last week, I'm finally like, oh, I guess I'm like really an adult now, right? I mean, mind you, I'm raising adult children, so that's a little complicated. I should have probably gotten there sooner. But there is certain wisdom that you have. Like, sometimes I'll have a conversation with my mother or my father or my mother-in-law, and like the wisdom they have from their life experiences is so powerful. And life is the best teacher, and the experiences we go through are the best teacher. And so Zaken refers to those who gained a lot of wisdom. The Talmud actually says, comes from the word kana. Kana means to buy, liknot. So they bought wisdom. What did they buy wisdom? How'd they buy their wisdom? No one goes to the store and buys wisdom, right? We wish we could buy wisdom. Sarah, I can't hear you.
You know how you sometimes say, you accomplished something, but you paid for it, and you don't mean pay for it in money. You mean paid for it in effort, time, in experience.
100%. And a lot of times grit and determination, right? So far we could see how like the determination from Yeshua, the humility, and now we're talking about the Zakanim, the elders. Again, the Talmud refers to them as those who purchased wisdom, meaning it's not just financial, right? Purchases are not for financial, which is what you're saying. And I could say that I know there are times with our students, right, who they can't afford to give back to Chabad financially. I have a young alum, they're not yet in secure jobs, they're not yet ready to give back. We have parents who they appreciate what Chabad does, but whatever their personal reality, they have young children at home, they're still dealing with colleges, they're not fiscally secure. There's other ways to give. And that's, I think, what you're saying is buying something. It's not always financial. It's not always a financial transaction, right?
I've been very intrigued by something all these years, though.
Yeah.
We have the name Moses. We know who he is. We have the name Joshua. We know who he is. We don't know who the elders are. We don't know who the prophets are or necessarily. I mean, we do know who the prophets are. We know who the men of the great assembly are. What I find intriguing is that right after Moses and Joshua could be someone like me someday. It's a nameless person who can transmit this to other people. And I find it very interesting that it's right smack in the middle of people we've heard about who are very famous.
Interesting. Amazing. First of all, Pam, I really love that. First of all, you brought up something first of all, thank you. But you brought up something that's so intriguing, because I've gotten in this conversation with people before with regard to Torah. Because like, what's Torah, right? It's not a history book. Names missing, dates missing. Like you said, all these elders, right? There are billions and billions of people that have existed, right? And the truth is, in a way, what you're saying is that those who gained wisdom from life experiences, we've purchased that wisdom using the translation of the word purchase we used before, based on the Talmud. We actually have a responsibility to give it over. And you know what? There's more to say on this, because you really brought up something fascinating, because one of the things the Lubavitcher Rebbe always challenged us to do, and not just us, meaning his shluchim and his shluchot, anyone he interacted with, is a very famous line from the Rebbe: if you know the letter Aleph, you are obligated to teach Aleph. No Aleph, sheer Aleph. We talked about this in Sinai Scholars' Moms, if you remember, that no one is exempt from sharing their wisdom and their knowledge that they've gained, especially if it's Torah, right? Life experience. Now, of course, we have to be seichel, and like, you don't walk around sharing, you're not, hey, guess what? I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you. Obviously, we need the humility and we need the other skills too, but we're not exempt. We're not, and I think you brought up something fascinating about it. Like, the Torah is not a history book. The names that are documented for a reason. And if they're classified as a group, there's a reason. But that being said, that you and I can't shirk from our role in this. Our role in making sure Torah is, is transmitted in a meaningful, uplifting way. And I know, Pam, you've written a few articles and stories that you've shared with me that I found, like, you have a gift, right? And all of us have gifts. I see, Sarah on Thursday, she shares with us, like, from her wisdom. And I think we all have gifts, and we have to be using it in the right way. And it's a call for us to step up and do, call to action. So in case anyone was bored, there's something to do now. No, but even that, maybe it could be as simple as like sharing, like, hey ladies, this class is available, come join me. Anyone's welcome, it's on Zoom. We're not limited. I could be sitting in my backyard, I could be sitting in a bathtub, and this could be a nice background. That doesn't make a difference, right? Like, the boundaries, the walls are gone. Like, we're just, this world is opened up in a new and very unique way, right? So each of us have the opportunity to share, whether it's our own Aleph, whether it's what we've learned, to share from our wisdom and our experiences. And it's not exempt to the leaders. It's not exempt to, oh, you're a rabbi. I tell this to students all the time. I'm like, you are the greatest ambassadors for Jewish life at A&M, better than me and Yassi. Someone looks at us, he's a rabbi in a hat and a beard. She wears a wig and a lot of clothing. Like, oh, they're like, they're the religious ones. No, every single person, wherever we're at, we have an obligation to step up. So very unique aspect that you brought in there. So the other thing is also the Zakanim, with that age and that wisdom, obviously it also took drive and humility to get there. And that's another lens that we can really use when it comes to opening. So now I have to say, like, and then comes on the next group. The Zakanim, next comes the Nevi'im, the prophets. And I found this one when I was looking at it, like, I feel like, how could I learn from a prophet, right? I don't know about you ladies. I don't consider myself a prophet, okay? I remember once, one of my kids, I could tell, like, said something that wasn't true. And I could tell they weren't being honest. And I said, like, I could really tell you're not being honest with me. Like that look certain kids have, that, like, you're like, and they said, how do you know? I said, mommies have these kind of powers, And he said, like, what other powers do you have? And I was like, we have a lot of different powers, mommies. He's like, is that like why you don't cry when you cut onions? I wear lenses. I don't cry when I cut onions. He thought it was like a superpower. Okay, since then he's learned I'm human like every single other person. But that being said, the prophets are harder in a way to relate to, for me. So when I looked at that one, I'm like, you know, what's that takeaway that I can really look at in my life? I don't know what's going to be tomorrow. Like, I think if anything right now, you look at the world, no one knows anything. Not the doctors, the psychologists, the scientists. Yes, we're adapting. Yes, we're learning how we can use things we've learned before to utilize to learn and grow here, right? The field of psychology, like Sarah on Thursday, tomorrow, this conversation that we've been having, there are tools, but no one, like, how we're going to walk away from this. Like again, we said earlier, the more we know is we know nothing at all. Sarah, I can't hear you. I don't know why. Go ahead.
Okay. What stands out to me, as I think, I never thought of this before, but as I think about it with the prophets, is that they didn't always like what they had to say. I mean, it's really something to have, I don't even know if I would call it courage, but to have the faith, I guess.
It's faith.
To speak up and say what you feel is inside you that's coming from God, even if you don't like it.
Even if it's not popular.
If it's not popular, and even if you don't particularly enjoy what
we all know a famous prophet who ran away, who tried to like not do what he needed to do. And we know how that ended, right? We know when we were on Yom Kippur, the story of Jonah. So, by the way, interesting, in the story of Jonah, the biggest challenge was that he didn't believe that people had the ability to change. So he didn't want to deliver the message. He had his own layer, his own filter, his own lens that he saw those people through. He didn't know that, right? And we all know they actually ended up, they did end up after the giant fish and we all know the story, the famous, kids know the story. It's a great story. We all know that they actually did tshuva, right? So I love what you said, is that we all have something inside of us, and that, okay, we're not prophets, but the prophets didn't necessarily always want to step up and do that. But their faith in Hashem is what really allowed them or pushed them or propelled them to stick with it. And the interesting thing that we're talking about here with the prophecy is that one of the main things, and I guess this is where that faith component comes in, Sarah, is that they understood that they were ambassadors of Hashem. Meaning, it was only because Hashem charged them with that responsibility that they were able to do it. It wasn't that they were the ones who like, wow, I'm so wise, I have this prophetic wisdom. It was because Hashem chose them that they were able to transcend the reality of most of our physical, mundane, like day-to-day like reality, and kind of blend the finite and the infinite, bring the infinite message to the finite humans. And you know what's interesting is we say a bracha, nosein haTorah, thanking Hashem that gave us the Torah, is because sometimes we look at the Torah as just as like, well, that's convenient and I like that about the Torah, so that I'll do, and this one not. But if Hashem gave us the entire Torah, like there's a level of humility and drive to keep learning and a level of understanding the wisdom, but there's also this layer of having faith that Hashem is the one who gave us this Torah and that there's so much in the Torah for us. And the prophets, like you said, it wasn't always like a fun job. It wasn't like, ooh, cool, let me sign up and be a prophet. A lot of prophets actually have very difficult lives. Okay. So, but they understood that it was coming from Hashem. And that's a real powerful thing when you want to learn. When you want to learn Torah, you want that lens, like we said, a lens to see Torah learning through is really, really important. And it's really with Hashem's help that we can, we're so lucky that we have Torah, and we're so lucky that we keep learning from Torah, but it's with Hashem's help that we can have that gift. And the prophets understood that, right? And because of that, they were able to, in a way, bring heaven down to earth, transcend the day-to-day and make it real. And so for us, we're like, I remember once we were at this group session with a bunch of students, and the students like, I have God like talking to me. And so like this was like a large group, and the rabbi was like, like he was so wise the way he handled it. He said, look, not everyone is so lucky, to hear Hashem. So maybe keep it on the DL. He was like trying to help the student. I was like, oh. But the point is that like, we have maybe moments where we have clarity and we have that. And a lot of times we're studying Torah together. And I know Sharon, you and I have said this, that so often that we're learning something that's Torah, that's from Hashem, that then it's like, oh, wow, that's really clarifying for me, or really practical for me, or really like a doable. And we have to understand that we thank Hashem for the Torah because the Torah is a gift to us. It's a guide, it's an anchor, it's so much. Okay, last group of people is the men of the Great Assembly. And with the men of the Great Assembly, so Pam mentioned that we kind of know who they were. There were 120 sages, and we know that they led the Jewish people when the Jewish people returned in the 4th century BCE. They had been exiled for 3 generations in Babylonia. They returned, and it was not a simple time for the Jewish people, okay, at all. And it was not a time where life was smooth. It wasn't like the temple period where it was smoother. And what did the men of the Great Assembly spend a lot of time doing? What did the men of the Great Assembly spend a lot of time doing?
Recording things.
Recording, what else?
I thought it was like a lawmaking body.
Yes, court system.
Mhm.
Okay. They were the Anshe Knesset Hagdola were a great assembly, and then people would come to them with, okay, we learned the Torah, we've been doing this oral Torah. And actually interesting in our just trying to see where it falls out. I'm trying to find it on our well, I guess for next week I'll have it, I'll locate it, because it's very clearly where it is. Okay. I'm struggling to find it on this map. But the point is that the men of the Great Assembly were sages, wisdom, living in it was tumultuous. The Jews had kind of been bruised and battered from the first exile, not most like uplifting, like spiritual, not, like really like rough times. And what did is that to me? Oh, okay, you're saying, okay. What are the men of I saw someone waving. They're just saying hi to squirrels. It's okay. What are the men of the Great Assembly really, if we have to summarize what they did, is they took, again, this Torah and brought it very, very real, practical application to people. The most lofty concepts. So often, and actually we'll talk about this a little bit more in Shavuos next week, is this fusion. Like sometimes we could look at Torah and it seems so abstract or so like, is that for me? But what you see from the Anshe Knesset Hagdola is that it's about the nitty gritty. It's about the details. It's about how to make Torah real and practical into our day-to-day lives. And so the practical application is that the halachas, the Jewish law that we learn and we study from our Torah, it's not just philosophical or abstract. It's for Tuesday afternoon when I'm in a bad mood. It's for Wednesday when I'm struggling to deal with someone who's challenging me. And that's a very powerful way, understanding and a lens to see Torah through when we learn. So kind of now looking at these 5 characters, and I'm saying characters, but 2 of them are groups, right? 3 of them are groups. There's Canaan, the Nevi'im, and the Anshe Knesset Hagdola. We can understand that why the mission is opening up with this, because it's giving us 5 lenses to see these passages in Mishnah through, because it's going to give us a lot of, could you stop shaking the table, bang it? It's going to give us a lot of practical takeaways, but we need humility. We need determination and grit. We need to understand like dedication, determination, and grit. We need to understand that wisdom is not something that we could just purchase, but happens through experiences. But that being said, we have to share it with others. We need to understand that the gifts of Torah come from Hashem, right? That there's a divine element. And then we understand that it's not meant to just remain in a divine sphere, but it's supposed to trickle down into my day-to-day life. Again, this is why I so much love this book, is because it always says, obviously it says a biography of the Anshe Knesset Gedola, and it also goes on to beautiful stories, obviously, but it goes on to like living lessons, and who's behind the quote. And okay, so that being said, let's wrap up just this Mishnah. We touched upon it at the end, but let's wrap it up why this is so significant. We said, and then it says the Anshe Knesset Gedola, the men of the Great Assembly, said, "Have a misunin badin, be patient in judgment, va'amidu talmidim harbe, and establish many students, v'asu siyag laTorah, and create a fence around the Torah." So it makes sense that the Anshe Knesset Gedola, whose kind of main role was bringing Torah through the lens of halacha, bringing Torah to the day-to-day life, like we said, how to live day-to-day as a Jew. And since they were, the men of a great assembly was a court, it makes sense that they would say, number one, be patient in judgment. And I could say in the past 9 weeks, patience in judgment is a really good skill to have. Okay, I could see a certain child or a certain person reacting a certain way, and I could judge them really quickly about it. Or even for myself, gotta be patient in judgment. Hear that, you ever, like, I've had it where like I jump to a conclusion and I think slow it down, be patient, hear the full perspective, right? Patient in judgment, huge, powerful tool and skill for life. And we can understand why that was something that Anshe Knesset Gedola really, it's opening up here, this Mishnah with it. And that was one of the things they said. And the next one is establish many students. And I think this kind of drives to Pam's idea of establish many students doesn't mean you and each and every one of us needs to open up or like become a teacher. It just means each and every one of us meet people. We have opportunities to learn. We have opportunities to share, opportunities to teach. We need to. Okay. And also, we also said we learned so much from our students, right? And the other idea we said is siyag laTorah, fence around the Torah. We talked a little bit about that. We talked more expansively about that last time. But the idea being is set mechanisms in place to help us succeed and live the Torah. It's like if I have a family visiting with young children, I'm going to put a fence around the pool, right? A fence in our backyard. Good fences make good neighbors. So a fence around the Torah means if you know for yourself that you're struggling in a certain area. I know through, let's say for myself, I realize that part of what I need in order to go through this 9 weeks as sane as possible, and Sarah, you touched upon that sanity, part of it is learning with other people, because that's always where I'm nurturing and nourishing my mind and my neshama, and I feel like energized, okay? Part of it is giving myself those little windows of time, whether it's to exercise, to daven, and part of it's literally just escaping to a quiet spot. I was talking to a high school group last night, and one girl said, like, it's very good to try to ground yourself and be calmer, but like, I'm always surrounded by people. There's so many siblings. I don't even have my own room. And I'm like, you are so right. Said, if it's not the room, go hide in the bathroom, outside, find a spot for like just a few moments to like, and I know for me, those are things that are tools that are helping me. But knowing where we're failing or where we're struggling, and I'm not saying failing because I don't look at failure as a bad thing. We know we've talked about that extensively. It's knowing where we're struggling or the cycle we keep repeating, put mechanisms in place to help us navigate that. And I look at that as a siyag laTorah, and on a practical way, in halacha, a siyag laTorah means if I know I'm not supposed to, we talked about this last week more extensively, if I know I'm not supposed to be doing business on Shabbos, don't handle my credit card. If I know I'm supposed to stay focused and anchored, shut your tech and your computer for the day. Go off the grid, shut your phone for 25 hours, shut your laptop for 25 hours. If the day of Shabbos is about that, those are ways, practical applications that halacha, the Jewish law, gives us to create a fence, a siyag, to prevent us from getting to that place. And for all of us, I think practically in our own lives, what are our, and I hate the word because it's just so overused right now, but what are our triggers? I just don't like it because it's like overdone. Like everyone's triggered by everything, but like, what are your things that, and if you've come up with a better adjective, I would love to hear it. I need a better word for trigger. I'm triggered by the word trigger. Know what you stumble on. Know where you're struggling and try to create preventatives. So those are hopefully some real practical takeaways. I would love anyone's thoughts or ideas if you want to jump in before we wrap. For next week, we will not be covering Pirkei Avot. We'll be covering Shavuot and the feminine side of Shavuot, because we're here at Torah and Tea, a bunch of ladies learning together. Feel free to share this link with other ladies. We will not judge if 10 more ladies jump in. More Torah, the better. More ideas, the better. We love it. Okay, so feel free. Any thoughts or ideas anyone want to share that jumped out at them? Any questions from today's Mishnah?
I do have, I don't know how to frame the question, but at the back of my mind, there's the recognition that this is all very masculine.
Yes.
This is all about the men of the Sanhedrin, the Nevi'im are the men, and although there were some women Nevi'im.
Prophetesses, yeah.
Yeah, and that, yeah, just generally, a lot of the laws and the things that you have to put a fence around are things that are required of men, not necessarily of women. There are times.
Oh, I think as women, we have plenty. I'm like wearing a wig on my head for a reason. Like, you know, but how about this, Sarah? I love what you brought up. It's 5 classes. I mean, it's not one. And it's certainly, what I want to do is next class, after the class where we literally talk about the feminine side of Shavuot and the feminine role in Torah and transmission of Torah and what's our place in all of this, I feel like that's literally what we're going to launch the next class with that question.
May I just make one comment?
What, Sarah? Sorry, I want to hear it, Sarah, and then Pam. What?
I feel like, at least, you know, the way that I was educated growing up, I went to a yeshiva all through high school, well, from kindergarten up, and the fences around everything and all of that was all, it never felt like it applied. It was all from a male perspective.
Interesting. Are you saying from a male perspective because men are the ones who are the great sages, or from a male perspective because it's not so relevant to women? I'm not sure which one you're saying.
It was not taught in a way that made it relevant.
Okay. We're going to change that. We're going to change that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to change that. We're going to keep learning and we're going to change that. And not change it because it was faulty. Change it because we as women have a responsibility and an obligation to raise strong, knowledgeable, empowered Jewish women. You know, like, may we raise them, may we be them, may we know them, may we raise them. That's, I mean, you know, like my kids, when I used to have the girls' certain discussion, which we had until this showed up, is my younger kids used to call it the you know, like the Hee-Haw Women's Club. I'm like, no, it's not Hee-Haw Women's Club. It's like, the world needs strong, empowered, knowledgeable Jewish women. Where is that space? Where is that represented in here? We're going to pick it up next week. Pam, you wanted to jump in, so please do. I would love to.
Yeah, I did. So, you know, later on in Pirkei Avot, I don't think it's too much later on, we have one of the expressions we've always used with our kids, especially to refute certain things when they criticize a teacher, for instance. And the expression is, who is wise? The person that can learn from all. And I always thought, when I framed hearing about all of these men in leadership positions in Judaism, that it was really for me too, as a woman, because I could learn from everybody. So I had a different perspective when I heard about all of these different men in the assembly, for instance.
Interesting.
So that was my perspective on it throughout my schooling. I thought that it also applied to me, that it wasn't necessarily gender-based.
But it could seem very masculine heavy.
Yeah.
It doesn't say the women of Great Assembly.
I'll have to, I have to think about what I'm referring to, because this was, 50 years ago in my life. But it just seemed like the issues, I mean, there certainly were classes for women, in high school we have the girls, Taharat Mishpacha classes and things like that for the girls separately. And most of our classes, the Hebrew classes, were separate anyway. But the issues that they were dealing with and looking at and how they looked at it were from, I didn't know then that that's what it was called. I mean, years and years later, there's feminist studies and all of that.
Yeah.
Of looking at it from the perspective of justice versus compassion. You know,
Okay.
things like that.
I'm gonna say this is amazing, and it's literally the segue into next class. It's just you thank you for opening up this is the trailer for next class. So you want to sell next class, this is what it is. We're going to talk about it because like I said, we need to, what's our place in this? Where do we fall out? And Pam, I love what you said about how lo min mikol adam, like, yes, even us, we can even learn from men. You know, like the famous joke, if a man, speaks in the forest and there's no woman around, is he still wrong? We can also learn. I've learned so much from my husband over the years. He's taught me so much about myself and about the world and in an amazing way. So this is not necessarily just about genders, but let's answer this, because the more we know this, the more we can impart that to our sons. Need to know this. They're going to have wives and daughters one day. Our daughters need to know this. So I think let's to be continued, for lack of a better cliche ending. Love you, ladies.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much. It's nice to meet you all.
Pam, you're meeting the nicest group of women in College Station. They're
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm from Atlanta, and I would have loved to have been in College Station. Was it last weekend for our son's graduation? We were very excited about that.
Yeah, his graduation on the board of Kyle Field. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it was okay. You know what?
Yes, we will be okay. We will be okay.
Yes, definitely.
Have a wonderful day, ladies. Take care.
Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Yes, it's not too early to take a Shabbos, right? It's like before you blink.
That's right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
I will
Bye.
see whoever tomorrow.